My name is Simon Brickner. I'm a fourth-year student at NYU's College of Arts and Sciences, and I was a client at Turnbridge Turning Point in New Haven, Connecticut from approximately September 2021 to May 2023. Before I say anything else, I want to dedicate this video to Vivian Bird and Victor Vic John Hill IV, two friends I knew through Turnbridge, who later died after fighting their own internal struggles. They were not the only people connected to Turnbridge who died while I was there or shortly after. To my knowledge, at least 5 people died either during my time there or shortly after I left. I'm not saying Turnbridge caused every death. I'm saying that this was a vulnerable population, these were real human beings, and the stakes of residential treatment are life and death serious. Vivian and Vic are the two I was closest to. I miss them both deeply. I'm making this video in their memory and in memory of every vulnerable young person who entered treatment needing care, protection, and dignity. I'm making this video because I don't think families really understand what they are buying when they send a vulnerable young person to a residential treatment program. I'm not here to say every single person at Turnbridge was evil. I'm not here to say no one was helped. I'm not here to ask you to believe every allegation in my archive is legally proven without records. What I am saying is this. I was there for about 19 months. I saw things. I experienced things. Other former clients have told me things. Public reviews say things that overlap with what I remember. And the questions are serious enough that parents, lawyers, regulators, and journalists should be asking Turnbridge one very simple question, which is that, what did you document? What did you document? Because, honestly, in a residential treatment program, that is the whole issue. If a client is assaulted, what is documented? If a client reports a sexual boundary issue, what is documented? If staff see or hear about coercion, harassment, outing threats, intimate videos, self-harm risk, medication issues, suicidality, or staff misconduct, what is documented? Who knew? What action was taken? Were families told? Were police or regulators contacted when appropriate? Were clients separated? Were records preserved? That is the point of my memo. It is not a revenge document. It is a records question. Okay. My memo is 63 pages. It distinguishes first-hand experience, direct disclosures, second-hand allegations, public review evidence, public record leads, and records preservation questions. It explicitly says that where evidence is not independently verified, it should be treated as an allegation or lead unless corroborated by witnesses, records, communications, or official documentation. That matters because the point is not rumor. The point is what records should exist if these events were handled properly. One of the first things I want parents to understand is that treatment is not just therapy groups and inspirational website language. Treatment is the house at night. Treatment is who your kid is sleeping near. Treatment is whether stronger clients can threaten weaker clients, and treatment is whether staff laugh at violence. Treatment is whether staff treat humiliation as tough love, for example. Treatment is whether a client who reports something humiliating is protected or left alone with the consequences. One incident I personally remember involved staff replaying CCTV footage of client-on-client violence. In my memo, I describe watching Phase 1 case manager replay footage of a serious incident involving one client chasing another client, spraying him with a fire extinguisher, and attempting to beat him with it. My memory is that Drew showed the footage to multiple clients while laughing and calling the harmed client a dumbass. And I think parents need to sit with that. If your son is harmed on camera inside a treatment program, do you expect that footage to be preserved and reviewed formally, or do you expect staff to replay it to other clients for laughs? That is not a small cultural detail, that is the treatment environment. I also experienced violence myself. In late 2021 at 94th Street, I was assaulted by an older client with a heavy wooden chair. The incident was on camera. My recollection is that later replayed the footage for me and mocked me for flinching. Again, the question is not just the assault. The question is what Turnbridge did afterward. Was the incident documented? Was the footage preserved? Was it appropriate for staff to replay it casually? Was anyone disciplined? Was anyone protected? There are also serious sexual boundary concerns. In late 2022, at 1212 Quinnipiac Avenue, I told another client that LM had crossed a serious sexual boundary with me and would not stop when I wanted him to. Overheard me relay this. His response, as I remember it, was basically that it sounded crazy and I could report it to higher-ups if I felt like it. To my knowledge, I was not formally interviewed, separated from LM, or given a clear protective plan. LM continued harassing me afterwards. Parents, Ask yourself what you would expect to happen if your child disclosed something like that in a residential program. Would you expect the staff member to leave it on the harmed client to escalate, or would you expect a formal protective response? Another incident happened around November 2022 during a Phase 2 movie trip to see Nope. After a sexual boundary incident during the movie, I told another client what happened. That client, MS, allegedly threatened to tell everyone I was gay unless I Venmoed him $50. I felt physically imposed on and threatened, and I sent the money. When I later disclosed this to Doug, another case manager was also present. He responded, "Why would you send him $50? To my knowledge, no meaningful action followed, and MS continued harassing and threatening me through social media. Again, this is not just teenage drama. This is a residential treatment setting. Clients cannot simply go home. They cannot always avoid each other. The families are paying enormous amounts of money. Staff have authority. The program controls housing, supervision, schedules, reporting, family communication, and discipline. So when coercion, outing threats, and harassment happen, the question is institutional. Who documented it? Who protected the reporting client? Who followed up?" There is also a serious sexual privacy incident lead in the memo involving EJ and DA. I'm using EJ as protective pseudonymous initials, not his actual initials, because he requested anonymity. EJ later disclosed to me that another client allegedly filmed him naked masturbating and texted the video to multiple people. EJ stated that Turnbridge staff knew the details, that staff were complicit, and that DA was downgraded to Phase 1 when police probably should have been involved. I personally remember seeing the video circulating at the time. The memo frames this as a direct former client disclosure, plus my first-hand memory that the video circulated, and it raises questions about sexual privacy, non-consensual intimate recording, staff response, police involvement, documentation, and whether the harmed client was meaningfully included in the response. Parents need to ask Turnbridge directly. If a client is filmed naked without consent, what happens? Are police contacted? Are families contacted? Are devices checked? Are recipients identified? Is the harmed client interviewed and protected? Are records preserved? Because those questions are not optional, those are basic safety questions. The memo also preserves public review evidence. I do not present public reviews as proof of every underlying allegation, but the reason they matter is that they independently raise overlapping categories: supervision, self-harm monitoring, contraband control, sexual safety, unsafe outside contact, staff conduct, medication oversight, family communication, admissions representations, difficulty leaving, transportation safety, and review integrity. One parent loved one review on rehabs.com alleged that a minor client was permitted to maintain unsafe outside contact with a person connected to prior sexual harm despite family concern, and that the client was later sexually assaulted while at Turnbridge. Again, I'm not presenting that as a verified finding, but it belongs in the record because it raises the same institutional questions: supervision, sexual safety protocols, outside contact boundaries, family communication, documentation, and protection after disclosure. This is why I do not think families should rely on branding. Not the website, not the star average, not polished parent testimonials, not the language of young men finding purpose. Show me the incident reporting policy. Show me the sexual boundary complaint protocol. Show me the mandated reporting decision process. Show me how CCTV is handled. Show me what happens when staff mock a client. Show me how families are notified. Show me how clients are separated after threats, violence, coercion, sexual boundary complaints, or suicidality. Show me what records exist. There are also staff conduct issues in the memo. One addendum allegation involves allegedly telling me when he was my Phase 1 case manager at 94th Street that he had thought of curb stomping me and explicitly referencing American History X. The memo frames this as a first-hand allegation involving staff intimidation, violent language, family contact interference, and client safety concerns. I want people to understand how insane that feels when you are in treatment. You are not free in the normal sense. You are dependent on the institution. Your parents are often being told how to interpret your distress. Staff have power over your phone, your movement, your family communication, your phase, your housing, your reputation. So when a staff member allegedly talks about extreme violence towards you, that does not land like a normal insult. It lands as institutional power. There is also reported suicidality phase down concern involving WS in the addendum. I say WS reported to me that he had tried to kill himself and had been removed from the facility for about 5 days. I can personally confirm that he was absent for approximately 5 days and later returned, phase down from phase 3 to 520 Whitney, phase 2. The suicide attempt account and alleged refusal to let him leave come from WS's report to me, so they require corroboration. But if accurate, the questions are serious. What happened? Where was he taken? What outside provider was involved? What was his safety plan? What was his family told? And why was he returned and retained? This is the pattern I want parents to hear. It is not one bad day. It is not one rude staff member. It is not one client conflict. The pattern is client safety issues happen, and the question becomes whether the institution documents, protects, reports, and communicates, or whether it absorbs everything into the culture and moves on. I also want to talk about shame, because shame was everywhere. Sexual shame, gay shame, criminal history shame, family dependency shame, you're lazy shame, your parents can't take care of you shame, you're making it up shame. The memo has a whole client culture section. It says the issue is not that Turnbridge created every harmful statement or action made by a client. No residential program can control every word spoken by every client. The institutional question is different. What did Turnbridge know, witness, tolerate, document, interrupt, ignore, model, or clinically process when clients and staff humiliated, shamed, slurred, mocked, threatened, or assaulted vulnerable clients? That is the point. A residential treatment program is not just a building. It is a controlled social environment for vulnerable people. If the culture becomes cruel, then cruelty becomes part of the treatment. If staff laughs at violence, that becomes part of treatment. If clients are sexually shamed and staff do not interrupt it, that becomes part of treatment. If someone reports harm and nothing happens, that becomes part of treatment. If a client learns that disclosure makes them look weak, stupid, gay, crazy, dramatic, or unsafe, then the treatment environment is teaching silence. And silence is dangerous, because treatment depends on disclosure. Clients need to disclose relapse risk, self-harm risk, sexual harm threats, contraband, staff misconduct, peer violence, family pressure, and fear. If the culture punishes disclosure, the whole safety system collapses. I also want to be clear about the deaths. When I say at least 5 people died while I was there or shortly after, I'm not using those deaths as props, and I'm not pretending to know every private fact about what happened to each person. I'm saying that residential treatment programs are dealing with people in danger. People with addiction histories, people with trauma, people with suicidality, people with psychiatric vulnerability, people whose families are terrified enough to pay enormous amounts of money because they are trying to keep their children alive. That means the institution has to be serious, not just emotionally serious, operationally serious, clinically serious, documentation serious, supervision serious, family communication serious, records preservation serious, because when people die, families are left with unbearable questions. What happened? Who knew they were struggling? Were warning signs documented? Were families told? Were outside providers involved? Was there a safety plan? Were records preserved? Was the treatment environment helping them disclose risk or teaching them to hide it? That is why this matters. My message to parents is not believe me blindly. My message is ask better questions. Do not ask only, is the campus nice? Ask, how many incident reports were filed last year? Ask, how many client-on-client assaults happened? Ask, how many sexual boundary complaints happened? Ask, how many times were police called? Ask, how many clients were transferred, separated, or discharged after threats or violence? How many clients died during treatment or shortly after discharge? Ask, how are families notified? Ask, who reviews staff conduct? Ask, do you preserve CCTV? Ask, can staff replay CCTV footage to clients? Ask, what happens if a client reports being coerced, outed, filmed, harassed, or assaulted? Ask, what happens if a staff member is accused of threatening, humiliating, or sexually inappropriate behavior? Ask, what happens if a client reports suicidality or serious relapse risk? And if the answer is vague, be careful. Because vague answers are how institutions survive. I've already sent the memo to I built a public archive. I added a testimony form so former clients, families, staff, and witnesses can submit anonymous testimony. I'm not doing this because it is fun. I'm doing it because I was there long enough to understand that what happens inside these places can disappear unless someone preserves it. And I want to say this directly to former clients. You are not crazy for remembering. You are not crazy for still being angry. You are not crazy if something happened there and nobody documented it. You are not crazy if the website does not match what you lived. You are not crazy if the public image made you doubt yourself. You are not crazy if someone you knew from treatment died and you are still carrying it. And to parents, I know you may have sent your kid there because you were desperate, scared, exhausted, or told this was the best option. This is not about blaming every parent, but it is about telling the truth. Family deserve better than branding, vulnerable clients deserve better than humiliation, and residential treatment programs should have to answer basic safety questions with records. So I am asking Turnbridge, what did you document? Who knew? What action was taken? What were families told? What records exist? Because if these incidents were handled properly, there should be records. And if there are no records, that is its own answer. Thank you.